At the end of Book 1 of the Aeneid, Dido begins asking Aeneas about individual events in the Trojan War. She asks him to describe warriors and to tell about what Priam was like, etc., etc. And then, after asking a bunch of individual questions, she decides to ask him rather to start at the beginning and tell his entire story. This is at a feast with the Trojans and the Carthaginians together. And at that point, Book 2 begins, and you notice that she asks her question for him to, or she makes her request for him to relate everything from the beginning, and then you see that conticuere omnes, all fell silent, intentiquore tenebant, and they were holding their faces intently, right? Everybody's fixed on these words. They want to hear what Aeneas is going to say. And then inde is not spatial here, but rather temporal. So then or thereupon, pater Aeneas sic orsus ab alto toro. So he's beginning from his lofty couch, right? And notice that he addresses Dido as regina, queen, very appropriate. So he addresses her as queen and says that Eubes, you order me to renovare an infandum dolorem. Notice that infandus is an adjective which effectively has gerundive force, and it is from for fari fatus. Something which is infandus is something which is not to be spoken or terrible, right? And then this ut begins an indirect question, ut here being used as how. And then note that Troyanas is pulled outside of this indirect question, even though it properly belongs here with opes. It modifies opes. Okay, so how the Danae is your subject here, how they eruerint, extirpated or ruined, the Troyanas opes and the lamentabile regnum. And then here, quaeque, note that the que is just the enclitic conjunction added to the end of the word, and quae ipse miserima vidi, here this is quae miserable, which most wretched things, ipse vidi, which I saw, et quorum, and of which pars magna fui. Remember that, of course, Aeneas was one of the Trojan nobles, even though he wasn't featured that heavily in the Iliad. You'll get most of his story here in the Aeneid. And then here, quis, your interrogative pronoun, is actually going to go with a couple of partitive genitives. So quis myrmidonum dolopumve, who of the Myrmidons or the Dolopes. The Dolopes were one of the Greek allies from Thessaly, and then the Myrmidons, similarly so, from that region. But the story of the Myrmidons is that this guy Aeacus at one point saw a load of ants. These are myrmikes in Greek. He saw a load of ants and wished that he could rule over as many people as there were ants there. Zeus granted him this wish by turning all of those ants into people who were, because they were originally Myrmikes, known ever after as Myrmidons. Now this is significant because Aeacus is the father of Peleus, who you might remember is the father of Achilles. And so Achilles is the leader of the Myrmidons there at Troy. All right? So this is one of the most important of the contingents of the Greeks. So who of the Myrmidons or the Dolopes, or which miles, which soldier, duri ulixi, note the odd form of his name here, ulixi, that genitive is an old form of the genitive, even though his name should be a third declension noun, since it ends as ulixes. All right. So who of them fando, note this here is a gerund by saying for farifatus is your verbal base here, by saying such things or in the telling of such things, temperet a lacrimus, who could restrain himself from lacrimis, from tears. And then he adds this aside, et iam nox humida caelo praecipitat. In effect, the night is dripping from the sky, right? Suadent cadentia sidera somnos, and the cadentia sidera suadent somnos, right? Sed, but if tantus amor, if such great love, in other words, if such great love, something like tibi est, is to you, or if you have such great love, casus cognoscere nostros, to learn of our misfortunes or our downfalls, et breviter, and briefly, to audire, to hear the supremum laborem Troiae, quamquam, although the animus meminisse horet, luctuque refugit, incipiam. This should be fairly straightforward, although my mind shudders to remember it and flees from the grief or the pain. Incipiam, I will begin.